Hey. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have our student organizing panel featuring three really amazing people, student organizers on UChicago's campus. My name is Chase Leitu. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a rising third year at the college, and I'm the program coordinator for Chicago Bounds. And I'll be helping moderate this panel today alongside Yiwen, who I'll let introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Yiwen. I am writing second year in college. I am a group leader for Bond this year, and I will be moderating this panel with our amazing panelists. So I see that we have a couple of participants here, and let's just get started. So we have um, Maddie from Care Not Cops, Vicky from Ethnic Studies Now, and Chioma from Culture Centers Now and Care Not Cops. They're both part of UC United. So why don't you guys just take turns to introduce yourself and also the campaign that you are representing today, as well as UC United. If Vicky, you can like take part of that and start with introducing yourself and UC United.
Okay, I think you said Vicky. That's me. Hello, I go by Vicky Shide. I'm a rising third year in the college. I'm a double anthropology and critical race and ethnic studies major with a focus on how the law intersects with immigration and indigenous sovereignty. As they mentioned in my bio, I organized with the Ethnic Studies Now campaign. And I guess before I get into that, a little history about UChicago United. It started, I want to say, 2 to 3 years before I was a first year. So you can do the math. In response to kind of an escalation of racist incidents that happened on UChicago campus that you can read about on the Maroon, or also if you stay tuned for Disorientation 2020 is something that UChicago puts out that has like a history of how UChicago was formed. And it was formed not just in response to things that students of color and faculty of color and our communities of color should never be put through, but also out of a need to reimagine what safety looks like on campus, but also how we learn and the things that we take in when we go to a university, such as the University of Chicago. And to that end, Ethnic Studies Now, which is like the working group that I'm a part of, we really take on this immediate need to remove power from administration and people who get paid to do certain things at the university and really put it back into the hands of students and of organizers and of community members who know best like how they learn and what they should learn and what is accepted as knowledge. Like you'll see when you take your core classes, like human soc, everything is the accepted white Western TM men, and we really want to challenge that and therefore challenge what schooling not only looks like here in America, but like eventually for everyone. So that's what I do. I can pass it off to Maddie, I guess.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I go by Maddie. I'm a rising second year in the university, and my major is neuroscience and pre-med, and I'm minoring in critical race and ethnic studies. And then the campaign I'm representing today is Care Not Cops.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chioma. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a rising second year planning to double major in computer science in critical race and ethnic studies. And today I'm representing cultural centers.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Why don't we just get started with the questions? I just wanted to mention, Maddie is a part of the Organization of Black Students on campus. She's the culture chair for the Organization of Black Students and is also part of the Black Abolitionist Network. Chioma is also Chioma has also been part of like the organization of Black students in the past, and you know, like she said, is working on UC United, and Vicky was previously one of the co-chairs of MECHA. So I just wanted to mention those things and like give credit where credit's due to each of them. So let's get started with the first question. So how did each of you first get involved with UC United? And we'll start with Chioma, I guess.
Okay. I first got involved with UC United by going to the DIS-O presentations like during my first week or before first week during first year. And it really like was both amazing and disturbing because it was like really cool to see students of color like organizing together and building student power, but at the same time it like opened my eyes to a lot of the harm that the university does specifically towards people of color. So then I just like signed up on the list host and started attending meetings, and yeah.
I can go next. I also went to the DIS-O presentations, but I started a little bit later. I think I got more involved like at the end of my autumn quarter. I went to meet after I got onboarded, which is like just like a one-on-one with questions about organizing and what you'd be interested in. I started going to meetings, and then ever since then I've been involved.
I actually Bound look a little different when I did Bound because I did it a couple years ago. And my group leader, Emilio Palderas, rising fourth year, you should look him up because he's really cool. We really bonded over our experience, and he knew that I wanted to somehow be involved in organizing on campus. So he invited me to go to a couple of ESN meetings, and then it just so happened that ESN was something that I was really passionate about. So I started like going on my own, but he was also there. So yeah, I was like, as Maddie said, really like one-on-one. There's someone already involved and then brought in.
All right, cool. So with that introduction, we'd like to go a little bit more about the individual campaign that you guys are representing. So what are some of the issues that your campaign or your working group is hoping to address on campus? And what does your ideal UChicago campus and experience look like? We can start with whoever is ready for this question.
I can go first. So like I said, I'm in ethnic studies now, and I guess something that we're kind of all aware of since we're University of Chicago students is like this notion of the ivory tower, and how there's like a lot of components that go into that, right? Like we were accepted out of so many people who applied. Whether you pay for it or you have a scholarship, there's like this stupidly high tuition fee in order to access like this knowledge. And there are so many barriers between what the university professes as like inquiry and things that everyone should know, and the people who could benefit from that, as well as what the university petitions to be like this valuable knowledge, because they definitely place more value on certain things over others. So what ethnic studies now really envisions is tearing down those barriers to inclusion, and in its place instituting a place in which community members, students, anyone really can learn not only from the professor or teacher or person who has wisdom to share, but from one another, because we know our experiences, like our lives, are also lessons to be shared to one another, not just someone's like syllabus or curriculum that may be out of touch. But in doing so, like reorienting knowledge and knowledge production away from whiteness, white supremacy, racism, ableism, and towards what knowledge is, and something that should be shared and free and accessible. And we also work in conjunction really closely with cultural centers and Care Not Cops through this notion of divesting in all of these systems that police like our bodies of color, but also police like how we think on campus, and reinvesting in a critical race and ethnic studies department, reinvesting in hires for faculty of color, reinvesting in, say, like an activism or an activist or organizer in residence, so that we can learn from someone on the front lines, literally doing the kind of work and learning the kind of things that an academic doesn't really, like there's some shit you can't read in a book. There's some things that you have to learn, and that's also really valuable. And I guess like another thing too is really just looking at how much punishment has found its way into our academic systems. Like if you're late for class, like a tardy, that counts against you. Like no one really stops to think about, like, you have a whole life outside of being a student, but it's not even outside of being a student. Like your life is multifaceted. Like you're a student, but you're also maybe like a sibling or a daughter or an employee. So there's so many reasons as to why you could be late for a class. So why should that be held against you? This like notion of like a grading scale, like what does that mean? You know, like do you really have to prove that you're a good student by getting an A or a B? And especially at a school like UChicago, like people will try to look down on you if you get a low grade. But like I said before, like a grade and number does not ever equal like the entirety of your existence as a person. So I think studies now is really important. I could go on forever, but I guess that's what we hope to, because we also know that like our analysis is rooted in like abolitionism, but abolitionism isn't just tearing down, it's also building up. But we can't just build up what we want to see, like it's a collective vision. So these ideas that we have, we're hoping to link up with other schools, not only in Chicago, but across the nation, and like collectively bring about a better university.
I can go next. So Care Not Cop's main focus is policing, as in Care Not Cops. That's main focus is divest and invest, as Vicky was saying. So basically that means we're looking to defund UCPD, which is the university police on our school, as well as disband. And so basically the goal is to eventually not have police on campus at all, but working towards like removing money from UCPD and getting a meeting where we can clearly see the budget and what's being spent by the university, because that's something that's not accessible to students, and it should be. And the reason like UCPD is such an important thing for us and for students of color in general is because not only does UCPD affect us as students, and especially as students of color, but also residents who are not part of this university and are residents of the South Side and Hyde Park, where UChicago decided to gentrify. So all of these people are not only policed by UCPD, they're also policed by CPD, which means they're being double policed every day. And it's our main focus to really like remove UCPD, because that's in our hands, as well as like actively trying to work with other organizations in Chicago to help with defunding the budget for CPD. And basically, I guess what I would want to see for campus is eventually, obviously, to never have police on campus. I think since I was a kid, I would never want to see police in my schools or in my cafeterias or in my college. So I think now I would never want to see that, as well as also not only removing police, but adding resources so we would have a different vision of safety. So more mental health resources, ethnic studies, a library that's accessible to not only students, but residents of Southside, things like that. So that's kind of the main thing we focus on.
And for cultural centers, I would say like all the campaigns kind of have similar goals in like the abolitionist like mindset of like going beyond even just like not having police, like Vicky was saying. But cultural centers aims to like give first cultural centers like the structural buildings to help support students of color, and it's a Black, Asian American, and Latinx cultural centers. That's what we're like demanding now, and those would serve to like not only give students of color who have to minimize their identities on campus, like at a primarily white institution, but also give an opportunity to like build student power and like unlearn like oppression from the university and like develop solidarity with each other. And a start towards the university, like I would want to see, definitely has cultural centers, but beyond that has like the university would be student led in like my dream university.
I really appreciate all of your answers, and really helping us like reimagine like what a university will look like in the future, like what a different kind of university would be that would be possible. Um, so as a sort of like next question, like have you guys had any sort of experience organizing before, working on these campaigns? What were some of the things that surprised you about organizing? What are some of the challenges that come with organizing? Because I know like a lot of times, you know, like as a new student on campus, it can be a little like daunting or I guess difficult to step into this new kind of role. So what was that kind of like for you guys?
I can start for this one. So I have had no organizing experience before like UC United. The most was like attending like protests and like doing things that were led by organizations where it was kind of like I was just being not used, but like I was only a body, rather than like actually like having a mind and having input. So that's what like surprised me about organizing, is that like you're more than just a part of like you're more than just like a body in something. You're helping make decisions, you're planning things, your voice like really matters in organizing, and your opinions. And like I feel like organizing, at least with UC United, is really nice because we don't have like selected leaders. We have like, I think it's called like horizontal leadership, where it's like everyone is a leader. So that was a really nice surprise about organizing for me.
I can go next. So I kind of didn't realize that I had been involved in organizing before until I actually learned what organizing is. I have like personal experience with like policing in my communities and against my families. So like that involved like making funds and doing mutual aid work in my own communities and helping like friends after they've been arrested and things like that. So that was kind of experience I didn't realize was organizing. And then when I became part of UCU, I learned that I had like a lot of past experience and skills from just kind of everyday living. So I guess that's like kind of the informal experience I had. But like what really surprised me once I got involved in UCU is that like organizing is not like a one-faceted type of thing. Like there's so many roles to organizing. It's never just being directly on the front lines or like in the protests. Like it's making art, it's making campaigns on social media, it's using graphic works. Like there's so many different skills you can have to be in organizing, and there's so many different roles for different people. And I think that's what's really great about it, because it's a collective effort. Someone may be on the front lines, there's medics, there's people making food to make sure people are eating, there's people doing rides. So there's like so many different ways you can contribute. And I think that's the really cool thing about it. Yeah, so that's, I guess it's a cool thing, I think.
I would check out what Dean Spade has to say on this, but I would say that before coming to UChicago, I was more of an advocate or an activist, I would say, especially for immigration. I grew up in Houston, Fresh and American, and these are issues that my community, like my own household, faced. So I was very vocal about how I felt, and I did like a lot of volunteer work, I guess, and really put myself in situations to see worlds other than my own. But then when I came to UChicago, that's when I guess I fell into organizing, like purposely fell into it, because it's like Maddie and Chioma said, it's much more than just showing up. And while it's not easy, I also say that it's like worth every moment of my time and energy, because I've never felt like an organization or like a group of people that center care and community than I feel with like who I organize with at UChicago. And I feel like the difference between advocating, in my lived experience, the difference between advocating and activism versus organizing is that, for one, you're kind of just like a speaker or like a megaphone, that you're just kind of bringing awareness to these issues. But organizing is more so about one-on-oneing, like onboarding people into what's going on. And then once they're in to the group, I suppose, always checking in on them and making sure, as you organize things, like as you plan the logistics or the scripts for like marches and rallies and occupations, they're also alongside you learning and planning as you do. But as you plan things, also learning and relearning like the histories and the histories that we come from, because organizing, what we're doing isn't necessarily anything new. It's like what we're doing now in 2020, but we must give thanks to like the ancestors and like the people before us in this movement who like inform our actions and guide us to where we're going next, but also give us the strength to take us where we need to go. And it's all about care work and making sure people are like actively making sure they're included, and not letting anyone behind. And it's like something really beautiful. Like sometimes I'll just, I don't know, like it'll just hit me that I guess I'm some kind of organizer now, and I feel love a lot, and I really appreciate that.
So I also want to quickly shout out to Alicia for plugging in DISO 2020 in the chat, and I hope our attendees will check that out. And this next question kind of follows with what Maddie said about the multiple roles in organizing, but I also hope that all of you will speak more to that, because I feel like a lot of first-year students or like students who have no experience organizing before kind of think that they don't fit into the traditional like definition of organizing, the traditional role of an activist. So I'm hoping to learn, do you see that there are multiple roles in collective organizing activities? How do you work with each other, and even like with with other campaigns, other organizations? And what role do you see yourself as playing here?
I guess I would say, like I said before, like there's so many different roles to organizing. And I think before I got involved with UCU, I really just thought it was like being in protests and leading protests and creating chants and things like you saw on the news or on Twitter, things like that. But like I said, it's so many different roles, and there's so many things that goes into organizing where you could really fit anywhere. There's people like creating art and posters and flyers and things with graphics and media. There's people who have to actively post this media and do tweets and make sure people are getting this information. There's people who are doing community outreach to work with other organizations, getting people in, having like people on the ground with us. There's also people who are organizing to get food, to make sure protesters are eating, to coordinate rides. And this is just for like actual direct action. If like on regular basis, there's people who are creating narrative and writing and telling stories about people in the community. There's people asking and canvassing neighbors to see how they feel about policing and other issues that they're focusing on. So yeah, there's just honestly any aspect you think of, you'd probably have a place in organizing, because it is a collective effort and everybody really is working towards it. I would say for me, because I'm in Care Not Cops, I think I do more direct action rather than like another route. But I think more in high school, I was more doing like media and creating mutual aid funds and things like that. So yeah, there's definitely so many different roles. And I think it's great to work with different organizations, because we have one perspective as UChicago students, but it's a much different perspective as a Chicago resident. And it's important for us to know that and be able to work with people who are both affected by UCPD and CPD.
I think going off of what Maddie said, this collective effort something that also relates to the last question of like, when you think of activists, you kind of think of like these singular entities or who are always like speaking out on things. But as I've said, and as Maddie said, and as we all believe, organizing is about that community effort. It's about that collaborative effort. Because I think a flaw that I have, I want to speak for others, that I feel like society really tried to get me to think, was this notion of individualism, and how like you want your name on that trophy, like you want your name in the record books, like you want your name in a byline. And sometimes that'll give you the instant gratification of when you're an organizer or like an activist. I think like having your name like be quoted in a newspaper, or like you're the one who's speaking at a rally. But that really goes against what organizing is all about, which is centering community, not centering individuals, because centering individuals is how part of the reason how we got ourselves into this mess. But rather like knowing what you're best at and being able to bring that into space that you're in is what should be celebrated. Like everyone has their own lane in the revolution, and if you didn't bring your gifts and your natural like capabilities to that, then like the movement would be missing out, and it'd be missing out greatly. And like, yeah, it's exciting, I guess, to be the one on the megaphone, but it's also like the amount of respect for people that I have for people who can like do logistics, or like do all of like the emailing speakers, or like manage funds and money, and like that's something I'm really thankful for, and I try to work on for myself. But I also know that I can depend on my brother and my sisters who are handling that. So like never think that you have to do something one for recognition, but you have to do something a certain way in organizing. But it's rather like knowing how you can routinely commit by sticking to your strengths and honing what you're good at, because there's room for everybody in a better future, and definitely like we could always benefit from you.
Yeah, I think Maddie and Vicky like touched on everything about how no matter what you want to do or what you're able to do, there's definitely room for you in organizing. Like at the last action, people who were on the ground, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did if it weren't for people who were ordering food, who were posting on social media, who were like taking care of other things, or running even police scanners. There's so much more besides just like being the face of an action. And I think that reminds me of like another thing that's like surprising about organizing is how much unlearning goes into it, because like UChicago really promotes like individualistic like things, like even comparing like our GPAs and like the dean's list and everything. So I think like organizing really allowed me to trust like other people to help me, and to stop thinking like I have to take on burdens by myself, and realize that like I do have a community that's helping support me. Like for the like organizing, it's for our certain campaigns and goals, but I definitely can say like the relationships I've built from organizing, it's people like that I know I can count on for like anything that I need, you know, and that they can count on me the same.
Yeah, I really liked what you guys had to say about the different roles and everything. I put the link to like the graphic that Vicky was referring to in the chat. I think it's a really great graphic to look at and even just think about for yourself. It's certainly something that I think about a lot. And yeah, you know, like you guys have been talking about all the different layers that go into organizing and how multifaceted it is. And you know, like Vicky mentioned how though it's a lot of work, it's very rewarding and very like it serves, you know, like a good purpose for them. And I was just wondering like what you guys do as mechanisms of self-care or checking in on your own communities, because, you know, this is a lot of work, especially, you know, when you have an action coming up or certain things that take a lot of effort.
One way, like in organizing, I think that we make sure like that we're all good and stuff is making sure that we're working with each other on things rather than just like relying on one sole person, because like that can take up all their capacity and it's never going to turn out well. And like a personal way that I make sure that I'm like checking up on myself and my friends is just like making sure that I'm in like contact with them and checking up on them regularly, and like making sure there's always like a open line of communication both ways to make sure that we're both good and able to help each other in any way that we can.
Yeah, I would say communication, like Chioma was saying, is a huge thing in organizing. And I think it's a really important way to kind of check on your peers and yourself as well, to make sure you know what you can handle and others know what they can handle, and you're working together to make sure you get it done without like going past anyone's capacity. I think that's really important. I would also say, just as far as like before actions and things, making sure you and your friends are like getting lots of sleep and eating well. And I think even like during our actions, like we did things like yoga and like workouts and like just general bonding time, where it's not always like necessarily like having like to be this really high energy thing, but just kind of sharing space with people and talking and getting bonding. I think is such a huge part of organizing, and learning about like kind of where everybody's coming from. I think it's a huge part, and the bonding part and learning trust is such an important thing. And I think it makes this thing so much more rewarding. So I would say, I don't even know if that's a form of self-care, but I feel like it is, just to be able to talk with people and sit and like share your story and be able to get to know people. I think that sense of trust that is built is what keeps organizing going. I think to know that I can trust Vicky and Chioma during an action and they can trust me is something that's really big. And that's kind of how the action can continue, because we have that continued trust with each other, that if we can't handle something, someone else is going to take it over, or if we don't understand, we're going to learn and unlearn together. So I would say it's really important part.
Yeah, definitely uplifting my other panelists said, and whether you join us in UChicago or not, which I feel like everyone should, but something that I experienced like my first year, my second year, when we began, I guess, our year, I don't know, make it wherever you end up, make it a practice to have everyone introduce themselves, but also introduce strengths. Like, what are they good at? Weaknesses, like what they probably will not be very good at, or like won't tend to volunteer for. Best way to communicate, like text or calls. When they are feeling some type of way, how to reach out to them. Like, do you ask them if they want to talk? Do you just give them space? And like, it's a good thing to just have that filed away for people in your org that you can like constantly go to, and over time just like remember. But it's also, as Maddie said, like centering trust in one another, in that like, I know you are a person, like you are a human being and you have these emotions and feelings, and like maybe we don't know each other that well, but I'm committed in the work that we're doing, but also committed to you as a person. So I'd say that's like a practice that I really like that UChicago make sure like we do. I would also say that sometimes it's really hard to do this kind of work and take time for yourself, because you're like, oh, what if I miss out on something big, or like what if they need me there? But at the end of the day, if you burn out, then like long term you won't be able to give your gifts and your like energy to the movement. So whenever you feel like you need a break, that's probably because you need a break. So feel free to take that break. And it's not easy to do, because a lot of us are driven and passionate about these things we organize for, but it's like definitely important to be in communication with your body, whether it be like your physical needs or your like spiritual, emotional ones, and take that break. Like my roommates and a lot of people, especially at the occupation, saw me work out, because that's a way that I like take care of myself, and it just like makes me feel good. And if I feel good, then I know I can be good for like the work that we're doing.
Yeah, every sort of feelings are valid, and it's always important to connect in with your community and your group So a lot of you have touched upon like the changes that you have been through since your first year, or things you have like be at this university, like things that has changed. So to our audience who are incoming first years to UChicago, why don't each of you give a piece of advice for those who are interested in getting involved with UC United and other forms of organizing in campus? Is there anything you would like them to know about the university and about what you're doing?
I guess I'll go on this because I think I was super shy to like actually just join a meeting or speak at a meeting. So I would say honestly, it just kind of takes the courage to just do it. I would say if you're unsure about organizing, or if you're unsure about UCU and you're interested but you don't know, just go to a meeting and see what's happening at a general meeting, or go to an event. You can always ask anybody who's organizing what how they got involved, or what are ways you can get involved. But yeah, I would really just say go to the meeting, kind of put yourself out there is what I did. And I think that's what worked for me. It's kind of daunting at first, but I think now that I'm here, like this is definitely a space I want to continue occupying. And I feel like there's a sense of safety and trust in organizing that's really beautiful. And I think the community you build while organizing is a great thing to have. And I don't think I had that in any other segment of UChicago. So I would say, yeah, just go for it.
I would also say that I was like a little shy to join at first for organizing, because it was like I didn't really know people, but luckily like I joined right after DISO, so there were a couple other first years who didn't know people. And if it feels intimidating at first, know that it's normal, because there are people who have been organizing for like much longer than you might have. Like for me, I was like brand new to organizing. I didn't even know what organizing really was. And then there were people that I was like, wow, you're mind at every meeting. But yeah, it can be intimidating at first, but just know that everyone that's there wants to help you get to where they are, or like go beyond that and like help you figure out what type of organizer you are. So don't let it intimidate you too much to the point that you don't go anymore, because it definitely is a rewarding experience and you get to like become the organizer you want to be.
Yeah, definitely what they said. Like, it's okay to be shy, and it's okay. Like, we were all those first years at one point, and like, how do we get connected? But like, you'll never know unless you try. And like, I guess people may look intimidating, but like everyone's kind of more or less the same age. Like, these are just your peers. So like, look past all of that nonsense and you'll be good. But I would also say that, like, if you're not the shy type, like if you're like excited to just like jump right into this, no questions asked, I would also give advice of like, the past work that you've done, amazing, great. That's cool that you did that, but like, you're also, wherever you decide to go, you're stepping into a space that existed before your presence. So really like acknowledging what you're coming into, and don't try to make it your own space, because that's very not cool. Like, understand what people have been able to create, and acknowledge and be grateful that like you can be included in that, and don't try to like take ownership of that, because it's like very capitalist of you, and don't do that. Just, you know, respect the space that you're stepping into, but also like have the courage to step in there, is what I would say.
Okay, awesome. So now we'll move into the Q&A session. So if any students, incoming students have any questions, please drop them in the chat, in the Q&A chat, and we will gladly take them.
So while we are waiting for people to submit in their questions, I definitely want to ask you guys this question about, so Vicky was just talking about like the space that you are taking when you're going into the new space. And Maddie also kind of touched upon that about our place with regards to the community around us as students. So I'm definitely interested to know, what space do you think we as students, as UChicago students, should be like taken on with regards to the surrounding Hyde Park community that you think people should know? Because I definitely think that as incoming first years, we don't entirely know what is going on in this community. So what are our position here? Yes.
That is something I think about all the time, especially with this like background in settler colonialism and how like coming into a space and claiming ownership of it, you kind of disregard and disrespect the people who were already there. And UChicago is an occupier. Like, they weren't always in the South Side, but once they were, triggered a lot of white flight, or like this white island in what was predominantly a Black and brown neighborhood. And so I think something that UCU does, and always at least attempts to, and very successfully I would say, make space for Southside organizers to speak, because like, yeah, we're only students at the end of the day for like maybe 4 years, and then we'll go somewhere else. But these people were like born and raised and are multi-generationally have been here. So like, as we're speaking as students, always make sure to pass that on to people who this space, this land is like for, you know, like always know that you're not gonna be the expert on what policing should look like or what a school should look like, but rather it's like a community thing that you're stepping into. So always think about that.
I guess I would say there's kind of like this stigma at UChicago where it's like, don't go past 61st or things like that. And I think like when living here and residing here and like taking up space in the South Side, like learn about the South Side and learn about the space you're occupying. There are like businesses you can support, and there are activities you can do in the South Side. There's roller skating rinks and things like that. It's different with COVID now, but there are places you could support where you don't just have to go to like the boutiques in Hyde Park or the places in downtown, and like get to know like the neighbors that you live by and the people that you're taking up space from and things like that. Because this was a community before we got here, and it'll be a community after we get here. And it's just really important to recognize the space that we take up as students here and the privilege we have in doing so. So I would say, yeah, I guess that's something I try to work on as I'm here.
I would say that it's important to always ask yourself, like, what are my intentions in doing things, and like, what are potential harms of it? And one of the nice parts about organizing is like, we all talk through things whenever we like make plans, and it's a good opportunity for people to like check each other and be like, well, I think that is like a harmful idea and stuff like that. So that's very helpful. And I think as Maddie was saying, like, there are a lot of opportunities to help support like the communities that we are like gentrifying, rather than just like giving our money to downtown or giving our money to like UChicago based things. So that's very important. And I feel like a large part of our organizing work, especially with Care Not Cops, is to serve like the community members which the university is harming. So just, it's important to make sure we're being as inclusive as we can in like conversations and in actions and stuff with the people that we're claiming to serve. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's definitely really important to recognize our role as students at the university. And I think you guys all gave really, really good both like advice and also just general things to keep in mind, like as we like navigate through the university and the surrounding areas. One question that did come up was, like, I think it's a good question about how to balance organizing and the activism that you guys participating on campus with, college and being a student at the university. Like how do you, like, especially during your first year, like how did you sort of navigate like wanting to do the work and like wanting to like organize and stuff, with having to, continue to be a student and like do the schoolwork and make sure you're staying on top of things.
I would also like add on to that. When I got to campus, I also knew that I needed to find like a job for myself. Speaking to like the first gen low income students, if you're out there, it can be a lot, because like if you treat all of these things like your student life, your work life, your organizing life as things that you really want to do, that you care about, it's gonna take up time. But you also should never do more than you can like follow through. So at the end of the day, like your commitment to something should not be based off what you think people will give you the most recognition for, but what you're most capable of handling and actually like doing the work. Google Calendar became my best friend, and I never really used that before because organization is hard, but Google Calendar became something I got really into. And when you want to have time with friends, I know it's different now with Corona, but I would always like, if I needed friend time, but I also knew I needed to study or like prep for a UCU meeting or something like that, I would do that around friends. I would find ways to make sure I could be doing both or multiple things at once, but I would also prioritize like getting sleep or going to parties or going to the gym. So yeah, just get a calendar or a planner. I know it's probably something you've heard of before, and I won't lie, like until you find your groove, it's not the easiest, but like you find it eventually, like you find out what works for you. But since you're new to UChicago, like you got to try some shit out first, and like not everything will work.
I would say kind of the good thing about like organizing with UCU is like capacity is always a concern. So like you're able to say like, hey, like this week I don't have the capacity to do this task. I need someone else to take on. And kind of the trust that you built, like someone else is able to say, oh, I have capacity this week, I can take it on instead. And then like maybe next week you could take something on for me or things like that. So I think that's really good. And then for like personal organization, like Vicky said, Google Calendar is a lifesaver, because like you can input events and things like that, but they also notify you, because like I'll remember to put something in my calendar, but I won't remember it after that. And then they'll like give you like a notification 30 minutes before you have a meeting that's like 10 minutes away that I know I have to walk to. So it's really good to like kind of keep you up, and you don't have to like remember on your own or like look in your planner. So that's been helpful for me. Sometimes like I used to use sticky notes and things like that to kind of keep things organized and just kind of know when you need to say no. I think that's important, because if you really know you can't take this on and you have to sacrifice sleep and eating and like basic tasks for yourself, it's not worth it. And I think that's something I learned in my autumn quarter, is that I would say, oh, like sleep last, do what you need to do first. Once you burn yourself out, you can no longer help in organizing or be able to help in school. So prioritize your self-care and your sleep and needs first, and kind of shift that into your schedule. At one point I had to put sleep in my schedule just to make sure I was getting it. So I think do what you need to do to make sure you're prioritizing yourself while being able to occupy these spaces as well.
Yeah, I just want to say again, like, besides like making sure you prioritize self-care, because like if you don't prioritize self-care, you really aren't going to be able to give 100 to anything. But also like with organizing, it's really nice because if you do find yourself with like a very limited capacity and you don't think you can organize to the same extent that you have been, you can definitely just like fall back to whatever fits your new schedule and like adapt that way. And then whenever you feel like you're ready to go back and take on more, you can do that as well.
So another question that I think is very relevant to everything that is going around is that how do you guys think organizing and creating a community, both with the students and the surrounding community, is and will be impacted by having to do things remotely at this point?
So I think that I honestly found like the strongest sense of community in organizing. Like, yes, there's house culture and there's RSOs and there are so many other ways to like build community, which will be different virtually, but I think there's still definitely opportunities to do so. But I think like organizing will still, we've found ways to like exist virtually and like still make things happen virtually. And obviously it's something everyone is still continuing to work on because no one like planned for it in this extent still. But it's still very much possible to do these things virtually. And as like health concerns change and stuff, that's something to like look forward to, or even like making sure like there's opportunities for like in-person things, but just like with COVID guidelines and making sure like we're staying like distance, social distancing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think like we were kind of talking about before, there's so many roles in organizing that a lot of these things were remote to begin with. So like things like creating funds or like creating graphics, things like that, narrative and tweeting and all this type of stuff that is involved in organizing, a lot of that is already remote. As far as things like come with like direct action and thing, it's just kind of heavy precaution on COVID and making sure we're social distancing and having proper sanitizer and things like that, and getting tested regularly. So just kind of as we learn more about our current pandemic and how we can keep each other safe, we kind of just apply that to what we're doing, and it still continues.
And I think also something that is important to think about when, like, say if big actions are gonna happen now during Corona, like the fact that people recognize the gravity and the importance of this moment that we're living through, and through Corona, through wildfires, through so many bad things, they're still willing to risk like their jobs, their lives, like their bodily health to be out there right now is important. And it's important to still be doing that. And it sucks that we still have to, because you would think that some people would get it by now, but that's not the case. And so just as you applaud frontline workers, but the whole notion of frontline workers is like a whole nother conversation to have, but like as you applaud people who are working in grocery stores or so go out to their jobs, or like being a student and going to class, like yes, you may feel that's necessary, but also check your privilege and recognize that people who go out to protest, who still do these things in the midst of death and violence, that's also still really important. And that's not to say that they aren't taking the precautions, like they aren't wearing masks, providing PPE or sanitize, like hand sanitizer and things like that. Like they're still doing that, but they also are sick and tired of this, and they don't want to let this moment end, because like this could be the start of something very big and powerful. And for UChicago, like us as organizers, like as Chioma said, yeah, we've been able to, it's not quite the same, especially like I will say that I love being in person with friends, but find community through Zoom and online interactions and things like that. Like the moment kind of necessitates that. And if you care about your neighbor, you also care about your health. So you definitely got to cut back on some of the things that are privileges at the end of the day. To be able to in person visit a friend is not something that everyone has. And now especially like check your privilege and just be able to go with the flow for sure.
Yeah, I think those things are definitely really important to consider, especially during this time. Another question that came up in the chat was sort of related to, I guess, like long-term organizing. So like, do you guys see yourselves doing this kind of work in the future? How does one sort of like uh, navigate like wanting to do this kind of work, wanting to be a community organizer, but also like trying to like sustain themselves, because you know like this isn't necessarily like a job that people have, as in like you know they get employed to do this kind of work. It's more of like work that they do because they're passionate about it.
Can you repeat what the actual question was?
Yeah, sorry. So the question is like, how does one who like wants to do this work sort of more long term, um, make it more sustainable for themselves? Because at least from what I know, there's not really a lot of people who are employed to do this kind of work. It's more just work that's done because like they want to do this work, not because like they're necessarily employed to do this work. So I guess the question's more so like, um, how does one like do this work like under like how does one do this work while sustaining themselves like financially? So, and I know we're all students, so like we might not be able to answer this question very well, but you know, like draw on either experiences from like others you know who are also doing this work, or stuff like that. So.
As I mentioned before, and I'm just a really honest person, so I don't know how some of you may take this. This is not to scare you, but like I do kind of support myself. And like, for example, last year I had 3 jobs in addition to all of the other stuff I do. One of them was like more of a remote position through something called the Community Programs Accelerator at UChicago. Another one was I was an office assistant for Dean Boyer, LOL. So I just like ran mail. And then the last one was an internship at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant Refugee Rights. And I was able to do that because the first one was remote stuff that I could do just like when I was in my room or at a cafe. I didn't really have to be there, but I could get that money. The second one was a job that as soon as I like did my tasks, like ran the mail, like I could just sit in the office and do my homework and get paid for those hours. And then the last one was an internship where like, yes, I would have to travel to the Loop to be in the office, but it was funded through the IOP. And then I got additional funding through Metcalf. So like you can get a job that isn't necessarily tied to the work, but it's just easy money, like a side hustle that you can just, you know, get in the money. But then you can also like get a job that is more oriented to the work, that you can also get paid for, or you can find money, because UChicago, they have so much money, dude. Sometimes they be giving it to the wrong people, and that's a whole nother conversation to have about our relationship to money and capitalism and jobs. But you are deserving people. Like, go out there and find what you deserve, because you need to get through these years, and if you need money, you need money. So like, take that from the university. And I saw a question on here that said, talking about like futures and organizing, like career wise, or is the end goal more of a community role? And I think many different people will have many different answers to this question. But like, what we organize for is a future outside of having like a 9-to-5 job that you have to go to because you have to be able to pay the bills, because rent is a thing, and because electricity is a thing, and whatever may have you. Actually, yeah, I got my internship with ICER through the ACE program, so shout out to that. But as I was saying, like, if you want to make organizing into a job, like, you may need to rethink why you organize, because you organize for what not the future is right now in the present moment, but like what you want it to be. So like, yeah, you can make a job out of it, I guess, but don't make it something that you feel obligated, like you have to do. Like, make it something that you're still passionate about. And if you so happen to get paid for that, that's cool, but that like shouldn't be like your traditional, oh, like I want to become a boss of something, and like once I'm a boss of something, but like that's how I know I made it. Because like there's never really a role that you can get in organizing that lets you know you've made it. There's always work to be done. So I don't know if that answered the question, but also like, you know, that's life at the end of the day. So you got to do what you got to do, and you can still have fun while doing it. Don't get it wrong. I have a lot of fun.
I kind of want to like reiterate what Vicky said. I think that's like such an important thing to keep in mind. And also just kind of remembering that organizing is a collective thing and not an individual thing. So like for me at least, and I think others organizing, the goal of organizing is like not to say, hey, I can put this on a resume one day and it can make a career. It's to like completely transform the future that we envision for ourselves and imagining like an entirely new world. And I think that's kind of the hard thing to grasp, is that we're not organizing to exist in the world that we currently do. It's for an entirely new one. Like Vicky was saying, where there's not a 9-to-5 job that you have to dread and go to. And there's not like this competition for like getting safety and financial safety and things like that. So I guess that's kind of like the unlearning process that goes in organizing, and kind of having to take a step back and say, hey, okay, like I've been conditioned to think like I need a job for the purpose of this, to have safety and things like that. But also like, can I organize to see a new future for myself and others, rather than just say, I need to organize because I need something on my resume, because I need to get this job and like gain financial stability. So that's kind of like, I think it's not really able to be answered in this question, because you really have to go back and sit and think like, what do I see as a future for like me and others in a community, and how am I gonna like take part in changing that now, or do I want to, and where do I fit? So I think that's kind of harder to answer because it takes kind of your own thinking. So I guess that's what I would say. As far as like actual college, like needing to sustain yourself and pay bills, there's a lot of grants the university has that they don't announce. They're just like things you have to find. I've applied for a lot of grants and like scholarships and things like that. So if people want to reach out to me, I'm totally fine with that and sending scholarships and things. But I would say get as much of the university's money as you can. They have so much money that they sit on and hate to give out to students. And like going through the financial aid process is like such a hellhole because they want to restrict money. They have so much of it. So whatever you can take from the university, absolutely take.
Yeah, I stand by everything they said, but just to what I think of whenever, like, with the question of like what could organizing look like career wise, there are, like, I've heard of people who have jobs in organizing where they get paid for it. There's people who do like direct action trainings and can get paid for it. But it's not like a get rich type of job. It literally is just to like survive doing organizing work. And there's also like, there are like 9-to-5s for organizing, but it's not organizing in the sense like of organizing as I know it, where it's like just like community based, like building power and such. But it's like they've pushed all the organizing work onto one person. So it's not like, it's kind of not at all organizing, but what you're doing is trying to like do all of the organizing work as one person, which is like, honestly seems like a terrible job, but feel free to look into careers like that if you wish.
Yeah, thank you all for those amazing answers. This question I think it's also very relevant to our work. So how do you interact with fellow students who may not agree with the demands of your organizations? And that question, I think, could be extended to just how do you engage with the community? How do you let people in? How do you just communicate with other people who might not know that much about organizing on campus?
I'm sorry, did you say like, could you say the question again?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you interact with other students who may not agree with the demands of your organizations?
I think that this is very common, especially like recently, to kind of hate on UCU. And I think that if people come directly with concerns that they have towards like me as an individual, not as like a representative of the organization, because I will never try to speak for everyone that organizes with UCU. But I think that a lot of the times it's misunderstandings, and that if conversations can be held to, I guess, kind of like enlighten people on like my viewpoints of things, that usually people who genuinely care about people or like me will come to an understanding, not maybe not like a complete agreement, but just come to an understanding and like appreciate where I'm coming from. But yeah, that's how I interact with other students.
I feel like with social media, this is always like a difficult thing to kind of like handle. But I would say Chioma probably said it best. But like, yeah, people who care about you and who are actually like, because like for a lot of us, like this is like directly impacts our livelihood and like our families. And like we're not just like doing the work just because we want to do it. Like there are like people who like actually have like family members who are directly affected by this. So I would say those who do care will typically like come out and like share their concerns like with the people directly working. And I would say for me personally, like if you would have like an issue with like how I'm doing the work or the way I'm going about it, come speak to me directly and like let's have a conversation, and maybe it's a misunderstanding or maybe we just don't agree completely and have different views, and I think that's okay. But as far as like just like complete hate and like not like a constructive criticism type of thing, I just personally don't interact because I don't have the capacity to really just like take in a bunch of things like that. And so I choose like who I want to surround myself with and like what I want to surround myself with. And if I feel like there's a lot of negative energy and things like that, I just won't, because I think you kind of have to choose the battles you want to take and what people who are going to actually listen rather than just people who want to spew hate. So, but again, I think it goes back to like education and learning about what UCU does and what other organizations in Chicago does. So yeah, I would just say for that, I would probably just provide resources, because a lot of time it's just lack of information.
In addition to what Chioma and Maddie said, I think it's important for any org to accept and acknowledge that they're still comprised of human people. And at the end of the day, like when we get rid of policing, that doesn't mean to say that like we're gonna get rid of harm that inevitably happens because we exist. Like we have different bodies, so therefore when we interact with people, sometimes the interactions can go wrong. But instead of responding with a punitive mindset and with thinking that justice can only be found in punishment and carceral solutions, what UCU practices, and I've seen them practice this, and I've been a part of these practices, is transformative and restorative justice and taking accountability. And when you mess up, owning up to that mess up, but also when someone approaches your org and says, I feel like I've been wronged by you, beginning those conversations that are mediated by someone else, like an unbiased person, so that the person who brought forth this harm and the person who did the harm can talk about it in a safe space, and that a solution or that harm can be addressed in a way that is restorative to that relationship, but also so that the future is a better one, and that harm like that won't be done, or that like the organization becomes one in which that harm cannot be possible. But like, people make mistakes, and saying that if you're an organizer that means you can't mess up ever, like that's like, you're not really respecting someone's humanity. And I'm not like advocating for people to mess up, but I'm saying that I know that I choose an org to work with when I know they're committed to accountability, but also centering care. Because in comparison to other places, whether it be other nonprofit or orgs of this nature that I don't work with, or just like things outside of this work, I see that they don't do that. I see that when a victim comes forth and shares something, they get like a pat on the back and a phone number to call for like a dean on call. Like I'm not gonna get anything out of that. Like the harm that was done to me won't be addressed. So centering care work and centering relationships and having the strength to say, yes, I know I messed up. What do you need in order to feel better? Is a practice that we do. And that goes back to conversations like when people don't agree with me, like that's fine. And you don't have to necessarily agree with me. Like you are in your own journey to hopefully maybe one day being able to agree with what I think. But if not, like I also have to take it upon myself to know, like I don't have to be the one to like onboard you. Like I don't have to be the one to force you to believe these things. At the end of the day, that's your choice, what you believe or not. Whatever you believe, better not be harming other people actively, because like, yes, we have freedoms in this country, but you never have the freedom to take away someone else's with your beliefs.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of you guys taking the time to answer that question. I think like as we try to, like reimagine what our university could look like, and reimagine just, knowledge and accountability and justice, we do come across a lot of those tough conversations at times. So I really appreciate you guys answering that question. A next question that someone had that's really interesting to me is, like, are there sort of different defined roles within UC United, or just like student organizing in general? How do you guys ensure that there's not this sort of development of a hierarchy, or like a sort of like climbing the ladder type thing when leadership, in terms of like organizing?
So something that UCU is currently at, and Mecha is like having conversations about this, is this notion of like horizontal leadership, in which like there isn't necessarily a hierarchy of like president or co-president or co-chairs and then whatever have you, but rather like there are people who come into the work. Like we have our 3 working groups, so there are people in working groups, and then there are people who like have been there for a hot second, you continuously give a lot to this kind of work, and they comprise core. But there is never like a distinct separation between who's in the working group and who can be in core. Like if you show you're committed to this and like you show up and show out, like you just are able to be in core. And they're like, instead of looking to a role that someone has is like, okay, you're co-chair, that means I have to look to you to be able to do this. And instead looking to your neighbors and saying, okay, which one of us can take on that task this time? Like which one of us has the capacity to do that? And like it being more circular rather than like looking up or looking down, or like putting values onto certain roles over others, is how you avoid that kind of, I guess, mindset. And it's also just like, I forget if it was Maddie or Chioma, but one of them was like, if you need to take a week for yourself because you're kind of going through it, like horizontal leadership allows you to take a step back. Other people fill in for you when you take that break. And then when you come back into the work, maybe someone else needs to take a break and you can just do maybe like that week what they were doing. And it's like, it's a very, like, it's a feasible thing to do if you work for it.
Yeah, I would just say like with horizontal leadership, like you do have that ability to kind of just like ask each other rather than, I think that's something I kind of had to unlearn when I joined UCU because I was so like conditioned to be like, okay, who's the president, who's the point person that like I ask permission from and things like that. And the thing about like horizontal leadership is it's really not like that. There is no like asking permission. It's kind of asking your neighbors like, what do you think about this idea I have, and like, would someone be willing to work with me on this to execute this project? Would somebody maybe want to help me plan this and like think through ideas? Can we brainstorm together? Can we spend some time power mapping together? It's never like, okay, because I am such and such position, I do all of this work for the rest of this year and I'm always responsible and people are going to wait for me to turn things in. It's more of kind of discussing every time, like who wants to create an agenda this week or who wants to take notes this week. It's never like, I am the secretary, I'm always taking notes. I'm so tired of taking notes. Like every week I take notes. It's always you're exchanging to make sure that nobody reaches capacity and everybody has the time and energy to keep going. And that's kind of how it sustains itself. So I would say that's something to consider in organizing, because I think it's very different than a lot of different other orgs, is that you do have the ability to just say, hey, I can't do this today, or hey, I need to do this tomorrow. And someone else who has the capacity can step in. So that's the really nice thing.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind is that in like any organization or club, it's natural for some people to kind of fill the leadership position for things. But with like UCU, it's really nice to kind of learn that like you don't need to ask permission for things when you do them, because there is like not an official leader. Although there are people who like do have more experience that are like going to just, in that sense, have more experience than you so they can help you out as like the good parts of a leader, I guess, without like having to answer to someone or to like question someone how you should do things. So that's like a good opportunity, I think, to build trust with yourself in organizing, because we have no official leader and it's kind of just like what you feel comfortable with putting out, you put out and you like offer up to the group. And yeah, there's something else I had to say, but I can't remember it. Just that it's really like UCU offers. Oh, yeah, there. So people who are like naturally more like organized, like leaders in organizing, like just because they have more experience and they've been like doing the work for longer and doing more work. I think like within UCU, it's really nice because these people will still make sure that they're not taking up too much space when they're talking, and like when they're doing things, they recognize that their opinion does have equal weight to people that are new to organizing despite their experience, although they can use their experience to help like guide a decision. So that's really nice.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. So I think we still have time for 2 more questions. So this next question is also pretty interesting. It's asking about what are the relationship between UCU and faculty. That is like, does UC United collaborate with professors or departments that are doing academic work involving the local community? Y'all can speak a little bit to that.
So ESN, and I guess our timeline, we kind of began our campaign with meeting a lot with like professors and faculty. There's this thing that you'll probably get to know called the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture, the CSRPC. So CSRPC faculty are faculty that we've met with a lot, and It's only recently that they've been willing to have less of a can I meet with you and more of a let's collaborate relationship. And so we are in conversations with them, but since they occupy, I guess, they're not students anymore and they are faculty of UChicago. So gauging where they're at and what they are willing to do is something that not just UCU, but other organizers have to do. But like for any org that you're a part of, like professors are cool. They're cool to be able to go to your events and speak on your panels and give advice and all those things. Like for Mecha, like I know we've definitely had a lot of events in which we've just like emailed our professors and they were down to come out and show out for us. That's one thing. And I do appreciate the professors who are cool to do that, but it's like another thing to organize with them and be in conversations about that kind of stuff. And that's a little trickier, but we definitely do that.
Just to add on a little bit, I wasn't a part of it because like I was at capacity this summer and couldn't organize as much, but Cultural Centers also like has organized with faculty and come up with like demands and like honestly I think like completely mobilized faculty towards like Cultural Centers and like to sign on to a lot of our demands for the university. So yeah.
Yeah, Vicky and Chioma kind of said it all, but yeah, faculty have like signed on and written letters in support of like what we're doing, as far as like been completely mobilized to like assist in our efforts. Like I think you can check out like some faculty like tweet on social media and things like that in solidarity and support. So yeah, it's definitely happened.
Yeah, so just as a last question, and I'll kind of just like attach a question that I saw earlier, and sort of like combine these two, I guess. What are some of the um, best moments you've had while organizing? You know, like what are some of the like big wins or big accomplishments that you feel that you all have had when doing this work? Um, and what do you hope is to come out of this work that you're doing?
I would say for me, like from our last occupation, kind of we were there for 7 days. So seeing kind of people who came in like a couple days later or have never like done any work with UCU all of a sudden like take lead and like do things that like we had learned to do over time. It was really cool to see just like leadership passed on and like how we were able to gain trust with people we had just met over time and like work together through the rain and like through all these obstacles we had, just to kind of see us all kind of putting together brain energy and figuring out how to get it done was really cool. And I think afterwards, like being able to like debrief and talk about that and see like how you went through this big thing with people is such like a cool bonding and like learning experience with each other. So I don't want to call it an accomplishment, but I would say it was a really good experience. And I think it was like a beautiful thing to both be a part of and to watch.
I was gonna say like my best like favorite moments in organizing have honestly been like just with the people I'm organizing with. And then I remembered the action and that truly was like amazing because it was people who also have never had any experience organizing to like be able to stop and canvass neighbors and to organize even newer people as they joined the occupation. And that was just like a very like beautiful thing to see. And yeah, that was very rewarding to like be able to see we planned something and it became way bigger than we could have planned for. And then like the sense of community like we practiced there was just like everything I want in like the world to be. And it was just such a safe space. And like I have truly never felt so loved by like a group of people. It was great.
The occupation was really live, and I was definitely happy to share space with you guys. And I could definitely speak more to that, but something else when you begin to organize on campus for on-campus things, if you decide to do that, you'll note that sometimes the university will try to co-opt your victory. And something that I'm proud of for ESN, and if you follow us on our socials, you see that we made a post about it. But because of the meetings that we were having and because of the conversations that maybe we weren't starting, but conversations that we made sure people remembered, like faculty or admin remembered. I don't know if any of you incoming first year signed up for it, but it's through ESN work and like my roommates and people that I appreciate and acknowledge so much their work that there are now like, there's a race core, there's introductory classes to race and ethnicity studies, and like that wasn't available when I was a first year, but through the work that became available, and like we didn't get a shout out, we didn't get like our name plugged anywhere, and you don't really need that recognition to feel pride. Like I have pride knowing that we were able to get one step closer to envisioning or like living in a university that actually cares about its students and its community. And I'm proud of us. We did that, and we continue to do good stuff. So join us.
Sorry. Okay, awesome. So that brings us right at about time. I want to thank all of the panelists so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate the work that you guys continue to do to make this campus like more inclusive and a campus that really supports and cares about its students, and continue applying pressure where it's needed. Yeah. I don't know if you had any last words, Ewan.
Yeah, shout out to our panelists, and remember to, if you want to get involved, definitely follow UC United on social media and get in touch with any of the panelists. I'm sure that they will be glad to talk with you.
All their information is above in the chat. So.